and I'm one of the co-chairs for STEPS. Jerry LaMorand is the other one, and she may be emailing you as we go through. And we're just so thankful that you have agreed to be presenters for us and answered that call for presenters. So as we look through our time together, we're going to hit these 5 points. One is where it's going to take the longest amount of time, is we're going to give you kind of a walkthrough of what the activity might look like. It will feel different because we are in an online environment instead of a face-to-face environment, but we'll walk you through a couple of the elements because you will have 25 minutes to do your presentation. So talking about how we can keep it rich but yet concise. We'll look at what are the general things that we're looking for as far as lesson and presentation guidelines. We'll look at what needs to be on the handout. We'll talk about deadlines, and I will tell you most of our deadlines are pretty flexible. We only have one that's pretty hard and fast, and that's because of the program booklet and getting your information in there. And then just a general guidance for naming files. So as you have any questions, please feel free just to type them into the chat or interrupt me. As I say interrupt, just get me to stop. And so the activity we're going to look at is called Think Task Task instead of Tisk Tisk when reasoning proportionally. And so this would be the title and the description that will be in the program booklet. So you can read that. Are your students still struggling to sort out proportionality? Experience strategies to focus on the role of attributes in making predictions and solving problems based on proportional relationships. And so when you write your task and your description, you want it to be inviting. And we often at my service center will start our descriptions with a question. And that is very intentional because we want people to start thinking about their own classrooms. And so if you are saying, yeah, our kids are still working on proportionality, then you're willing to engage at least long enough in the description to think, oh yeah, that could apply to me. And then we see a little bit more about how they're going to experience strategies. And so you know, teachers, we like to get things that we can take back to our classroom. So helping them see what can I take back to my classroom is really important. You don't want it to be much longer than maybe 3 sentences, because then people are like, wow, if they can't explain what their session is in 3 sentences, then maybe it's not very concise. And so you want to make sure it's interesting and it's not, as somebody said, a snooze fest. I'm like, that's a good word to describe it. So you wanted to bring out the fun and what that's going to look like, but you want to make sure that the experience is as advertised. So don't promise 100 strategies, because you won't get to 100 strategies in that. Sometimes people like to hear, come experience 3 strategies. So thinking about what you are looking for, and really, what excites you about the activity? Whatever excites you is probably what should be in there. Okay? So when participants come, they will be with me for 25 minutes. And the same way we do with our kids, we want to start with kind of the session outcomes. And in this case, many of our districts in the region, they expect their teachers to write a content standard as well as an English language learning standard. And so we provide both of those. So as a result of this experience, we want kids to be able to say, I can make predictions from given problem situations, or I can describe the mathematical reasoning I used to make a prediction. Now, what we know is that our English language learners, depending on their proficiency with the English language, we may have to scaffold those pieces, but this at least is a starting point so we know what we're going to be working with. So what's next on the screen is in one of the PDFs that I sent to you. In the presentation, I tell my participants, okay, you have these cards and they've already been pre-cut. They're in a little baggie. So I want you and your 2 or 3 people that you're seated near, I want you to look at these problems and I want you to sort them into categories. And so kind of think about, why did you sort them into those categories? And what would you title that category? Okay, so I'm going to give you an example. On this next slide, there are 4 problems that somebody put into a category. So I want you to take just a moment, read those 4, and then either type into the chat window or speak and say, what title would you give this particular category? Okay, so I'll give you about 3 minutes.
No.
Need a good title.
When you type it,
Yes, that's what she said.
I think we should.
All right, so that has been about 1 minute. And that's kind of interesting to think, wow, 1 minute. So your participants are going to have, they would have about 16 of these cards to sort through. And so when I've done it in face-to-face trainings, they have about 7 to 8 minutes where I am not talking. I am walking around, I am facilitating, and they are actually trying to puzzle through and think about what this looks like. Now, what are they not doing with these problems? They're not. Yeah, they're not solving them. They're not writing them down. Where it's just really, okay, what do these look like? And so, did anybody have any suggestions for what you might title this? You can either speak it or type it.
Here's a book I had that was called like Who's Bigger or something like that. It was, you can say it.
Yeah, we can hear you. So you can say that. We didn't mute you. So find the difference.
Yeah, find the difference.
Absolutely. Comparisons. We've had some people when they look at this, they're like, well, those are more qualitative comparisons. And so we talk about, well, what do you notice about all of those problems? Okay, so they do involve comparison. And what else?
There's no numbers in this problem.
Yeah, there's no
numbers at all in the problem.
Right. So that's when we talk about those qualitative comparisons. We're really getting to see, what do kids understand about proportionality? And when things change, and how do those comparisons help me when I don't have the same number of pizzas, or I don't have the same number of people? So it's really getting to that very deep conceptual understanding. Okay? So another set of problems might be this one. I'm going to add some numbers. We have the Smith family. Even though it doesn't give numbers, we can tell there's 2 girls and 3 boys. The Garza family has 2 boys and 2 girls, but which family has more girls?
I like that question.
And then we have the one about the lantana bush and the oak tree. They both start at different heights. Okay, now they've grown. They've both grown by 6 feet, but which plant grew more? So we're getting to some more sophisticated reasoning where we have to think about, what does that tie back to? What's my whole? What are the portions? What are the percents? Even the newest movie being on sale. Okay, and so in the presentation, we give the participants time to go through and think about, what are those categories? What might it look like? And then what we're going to, as we debrief, our debrief will be pulling out these titles. Well, what did you call this? Did anybody else have a category like that? Because we really want them to talk about the mathematics and what kids understand. And so in this group, there's one card that really doesn't quite belong. Anybody, which card do you think does not belong?
Is the most square. The dimensions of 3 triangles.
Yep. Rectangles.
Rectangles.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. What do the other 3 have in common?
Proportionality.
or they want to know who went faster, who's bigger, or who's like, they want to know what's the most or more or something like that.
And what's better buy? Which one is selling more? And to do that, I have to find a what?
Unit rate, right?
I had to find a unit rate, right? So those three, the fertilizer, the trucker, and the movie palace, they all have a unit rate, which we can go back to and then compare to say which one is the better buy. So when I look at the ones with the rectangles, it's not really a rate. Do I still have to use proportionality to answer that question?
No. Use more. I guess you could.
I would, but that's
Yeah.
So you could, right? Because what makes something square?
Having the same dimension.
Right. So my length and my width are the same. And what does that look like when I make a ratio to compare length to width?
Yeah.
That'd be equal.
Yeah, it'd be equal. It comes down to being 1, right? And so I can say between rectangle A, B, and C, which ratio is closer to 1?
One,
So
yeah.
even though all of these are proportional in their nature and thinking about a ratio, they're not all the same. And so that's one of the things, when we do this activity with kids, we want to see what are they attending to. Are they attending to there's just comparisons? Or are they attending to what Kim typed in about being rate? Are they attending to how I solve it? What is that thing that we're looking at? Before they even start number crunching, we want them to make sense of the problem. So the handout that they would have, my participants, would look like what's on the screen now. That's the student side. It is a very condensed, shrunk version of what I might do in the classroom. So in the classroom, I'm going to ask them to make groups and then to title them and then go to write a description. So if they start to talk about, oh, all these problems are about fertilizers. Okay, so describe what that is. Oh, all of them are about selling fertilizer. Okay, now make a prediction. Each one of these requires you to answer a question that you have to dive into the mathematics. So how would you go about making predictions or answering these questions? Now I will tell you, kids, sometimes it's when they get to this making predictions that they kind of shift gears. And they're like, oh, wait, even though the context is all about fertilizer, the math really isn't the exact same. I have to think about them differently. And that's what we want to have happen. And so this part right here is where I'm going to have them record that and go about and talk, because I want to see what are they attending to. Because if all they're attending to is the context and not the underlying mathematics, then on the assessment they fall apart because they didn't learn the mathematics in a deep, rich way. And so those are some of the conversations that we're going to bring forward with our group. Now this activity could have taken me 15 minutes. It might have taken me 20 minutes. It will depend on my group and how I gauge that they're doing, my teacher group, and then what kind of conversations do they want to have. So the next 2 activities I have built up so that they can be flexible in how much time they take. So if I look at this group of problems, I want us to really focus on the one about the brands of fertilizer. Okay? What's going to make that problem a challenge for students to solve?
There's no choices.
Yeah, the ones that talks about 2 brands of fertilizer. There's no choices.
Okay, 2 brands.
They weigh together 81, but there's no way to break it down.
Yeah, it's tough to break down. Kim said it's multi-step. Absolutely. And besides that, we have bundles and bags and fertilizer in the same amount. So it's multi-step, which we know throws kids off. And then they have to do a comparison, and they have to think about this cost, which we don't even have a number for. Right? So there's lots of places that they can get confused. And so we want to give kids a strategy. What can you do when you get stuck and when you get confused? And so one of those we have what's called a fine-tuning protocol. A protocol is just like a routine, a set of steps that you follow. And so if I don't have a lot of time in my presentation left, what I'll do is say, okay, in the bottom part of your handout, I want you to write down what the 4 steps of this protocol are. So first we ask kids, pick a problem that's confusing to you. So we're not even asking them to solve all 16, but we're going to really dive into one problem. And I don't want them to spend time doing something they've already mastered. So let's pick one that's confusing. I want you to go in there, and then step 2, we have them, are there words or are there sentences that make the problem confusing? Now, don't highlight the entire problem. Yeah, I see that those students too. They're like, the whole thing is just confusing.
Circle all the numbers too. All the numbers must be circled.
Yeah, and all the numbers, and but what is it that you need to ask somebody about? What is it that's confusing? There's a difference between something being confusing and then something taking a couple of reads, right? So let's highlight the things that make it confusing, and then ask a partner to rephrase the word or the sentence that confuses you. And I want you to take it sentence by sentence. What does that look like? And then the 4th step in the protocol, they're going to rewrite the problem so that it makes more sense. So that could be rewriting it as a bulleted list. That could be rewriting with a diagram, with pictures, to help me make sense of what's going on. Okay? Now, if I found that I went through my card sort really quickly, and I actually have 15 minutes left in my presentation right now, you know what we're going to stop and do? We're going to practice the fine-tuning protocol. So I've built in some things to the presentation that I can either briefly mention, because if I give you this strategy, if you've been in the classroom for 1 year, you understand what you need to do with this. But it also helps to practice it, so we have that opportunity. And then another strategy, like let's say I used up all my time. Then I stop right there and I say, all right, thank you so much for joining us. It's time to move on to the next session. But if you look in that lower right-hand side, we do want kids to actually solve it, so we might give them a problem-solving board to solve that. But again, if I find I have time, I'm going to dive into another possible way that we could go into this solving. And again, we're talking about going into 1 or 2 problems very deeply rather than doing a lot of problems on the surface. And so another protocol we can talk about is a paired summary. And that's where they pick a problem to read and solve. And so we actually did the reading by using the fine-tuning protocol. And then as a pair, we're going to fill in this chart. It's just a 4-step problem-solving process. It's in almost every textbook. Every district seems to have their version of that. But we'll go through and fill in that chart. And I want you to highlight, what are the parts that were most important to you? In that fertilizer, I think one of the most important parts of that was the C part. Because if you miss any information in the beginning, the whole thing will be wrong. And so we want to look at what that might be. And again, here's another opportunity to fill in some writing and get them to go deeper. Turn what you highlighted into a paragraph about problem solving. And so we're having them write about the proportions they set up, with the ratios they dug into. Did they have to simplify? What did they think about? So we're getting them to go very deeply into that. But if I just stopped here, do you still have a strategy, an activity you can take back to your room?
Yes.
Absolutely. Right? So it's kind of like planning for a sponge activity, but it's still something that is meaningful that you can take back. Because our teachers are just like our kids. They can tell when we're filling time, and they can tell when we're sharing something really deep. So you want to plan for something that doesn't require a lot of preparation on your part, but will allow you to shrink or expand as your group conversations change. Okay. All right, questions so far?
Shelley, when you were talking about presentation, would you say it's good to, when you're practicing, to maybe have it 15 to 20 minutes and leaving that extra 5 minutes or 10 for questions and things like that? Would you say that's a good prep time, like a good 18 to 20 minutes, or what would you suggest?
I think it depends. If you find that when you get in a nervous situation that you tend to speed up when you talk, you probably want to plan about 30 minutes.
Okay.
Because what I find is that people in the step sessions don't tend to ask a lot of questions. And then you end up having a lot of space at the end. But if you know you get into a situation where you start presenting and you start talking and adding stories about your students or how this worked or problem solving, then you'll want to plan on the shorter side of things.
Okay.
Yeah, some people are really good and they can time it down to 25 minutes. I am not one of those people. I always think it's going to take 25 and it tends to go over because it's like in the classroom. I stop and pause where my participants need me to stop and pause because it's better to do one or two things really well than to rush through 5 things.
Right.
So good question. So when we think about the general guidelines, they are that, but we do want it to be interactive. And so this was not as interactive because it was online versus face-to-face, but we do want it to be about that deep conceptual ideas. We don't want it to be, here's your formula, you plug in these values, you solve it. We know there's a place for practice and procedures in the classroom, but this is about that first line instruction. And then at this time of the year, what we found is people start gearing up for their review for testing. And so they get into review mode. But we want you to not do that. We want you to think first line instruction because this is not about reviewing concepts. It's about making sure they're good and solid. We do want it to be aligned to a concept or specific TEKS. Now I say specific TEKS. If you look at this lesson and you look at this teacher page, you'll see I have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade student expectations on that page. And that's because where you go with the problem, I may pull some of those and not use them in a 6th grade classroom. I may focus on certain problems within the 7th grade classroom. I may focus on something different. So regardless of which grade level I'm in, I can pull something out of it. It's all about the proportional reasoning. But you don't want to do something that's so generic. It's like, go find all the circles in the environment and you stop there. That's not deeply aligned to a concept that we want to look at. So I recommend take a lesson that you and your students love, and that's what you need to do because we know you're teaching things that are aligned to your TEKS. We've said this before, but you have 25 minutes to present. And you have 25 minutes to present, then you have like a 5-minute passing period. And then you'll do the same presentation to a new group of people for 25 minutes and then like a 5-minute passing period. And so you want to try to keep that as close to 25 minutes as possible. A timer on your phone, however you mark your time in class will be one of your best friends. And that's where it's also good to have a partner because your partner can say, kind of give you a cue, we need to speed this up, or, whoa, we're running through this really quickly, let's slow down. And so one thing that we do say is that we do want your participants to be actively engaged. If you are talking for those full 2.5 hours, you're going to be exhausted because you will do this a total of 5 times. And so with partners, some people choose to say partner A is going to be the 1st, 3rd, and 5th session, and partner B is going to be the main presenter for 2 and 4. Some say, oh, we're going to split, and here's the roles that we're going to play, and they really team present, and they team teach. Others are like, wow, my partner really doesn't like to present in front of adults, so I'm going to do the first 3, and they're going to do the last 2. It's entirely up to you, but what I say is, plan an activity to where the participants are doing all the work.
I agree.
Right? I love this particular presentation. I didn't write it. Actually, my boss did. And I love it because I do very little talking in the actual face-to-face presentation because they're doing the sorting and talking at their group. When we're doing it whole group, I'm asking them, well, what was your title? How would you solve that? Anybody have anything extra? And I'm pulling together the strings. So you want to make sure that you set it up so that you are letting the participants do the heavy lifting.
Perfect.
All right, so as you go to put your presentation together, I do recommend you have a content and a language I can statement. You can put that on a PowerPoint, or you can put it on a sheet of paper and put it underneath the document camera that they provide. But we always like to anchor to what are our outcomes. The other thing I had in my presentation is you'll notice on the handout, I didn't have all this information. So I got around that by putting it on the slide. So again, I put it on a PowerPoint slide because that's just what we do with our presentations. But you could also do it on a sheet of paper. It's whatever works for you is what we want you to do. And same thing with the paired summary. Now the handout itself is going to be two-sided. That's it. We as in CAMT pays to make them the copies. And so one side will be the teacher page, the other side will be a student page or a recording. And like the example you have, we really condense it so that they can get a little flavor of what's supposed to be on there. But then what we do is the cards that we used, and then the full-size pages, we made those available for digital download. And we'll post those for people to download so they can get that full size to use with their kids. And so this next slide, that's what the handout looks like. The teacher page and then the recording page. But then what's available online are the cards for them to copy, and then the fine-tuning and the paired summary. That's there as a full-size page that they can blow up. They can put it on their wall. They can give kids copies of it. So we want them to be able to access that. So again, printed handout, digital download. Okay. All right, so on the teacher page, I think it's document number 3 in the ones that I emailed. It has all of these requirements down there, so don't feel like you have to hurry up and write these down. But these are the things we want to have on there. The first is the rationale. This is not the same as your description. Your description for the catalog is the fun. I want to bring you in. I want you to come and be, engaged with us. The rationale is, why did you pick this? Why this particular math topic? We had one group on Saturday, and what they started thinking they were going to do was talk about developing the concept of pi and how does that apply to the formulas. But when they really started to dig in, they said, you know what, our kids really have a lot of confusion when it comes to the formulas between diameter and radius. We really need to help them tie into how do those relate to the formulas and the concepts. So once they started to write their rationale, their activity shifted. Now, when we talk about the TEKS, you may have an activity that actually addresses 4 or 5 student expectations, but because of space limitations, just really focus on the 1 or 2 that are most tightly aligned. And we do ask that you pick one process standard that you feel is most tightly aligned. We know you could address several in a lesson, but maybe just pick one. We do want you to pick one English language proficiency standard to include. So if that's not something that your district does a lot of work with or your particular campus does, let me know. We can help you select one. And then the description of the activity, that's kind of like your step-by-step, your bulleted list, just enough to where when teachers go to pull this out during the school year, they can recreate the experience and they know what's there. All right, the next section. This is the part that's probably the most challenging for teachers and specialists that I work with. And that's, what are the most important questions or ideas that you want to come out of this activity? We get really good about asking questions to debrief an activity. What did you do first? What step did you do? Those are very specific and tight questions. Here I want them to be, what are the generalizing questions that you want kids to remember a week from now, 2 months from now, a couple of years from now? What do you really want them to deeply understand? So if we get real focused on well, the fertilizer problem versus the bush problem versus we're attending to the surface level of what we're doing. These questions are more about what you guys indicated in your titles. But we're making comparisons here. We are talking about rates where we're comparing two different quantities. Those are the big ideas that you want to have those questions be. Okay, and so you'll see a few of those ideas on the teacher page for the sample lesson. And I will say, as we go back and forth, you'll submit this to Jerry and we do a read through to make sure, because you know when you write it, it makes perfect sense to you. But when someone else is reading it and they're not in your head, they may have some questions. And so Jerry and I try to catch simple things like typos, but also just clarity. But the number one thing that we go back and forth with is the important questions and just really saying, okay, are we understanding the intent of the lesson? And when I say back and forth, it's not an arduous process. It's usually 1 or 2 emails. So don't let that scare you off. And then the extensions. Are there things that could be done to the activity to move it up a grade level, move it down a grade level? Could we extend it for our gifted and talented students? Does that extension need to be a scaffold to support our students who are struggling with the mathematics or they're struggling with English language? Whatever it is, and that's where your experience as a classroom teacher who's done this activity really is important. Say, oh my goodness, my kids really struggled with this, and here's how we addressed it. You know how much, I know how much I always appreciated that, so I will say our participants do as well. And then if you still have room on your page, you can just put notes and leave a place for people to go in and fill in any notes they want to have. Now what I hear from teachers, from presenters is, do I have to use the font that's in the template? No. Can I make the font bigger? Yes. Can I make the font smaller? Yes, but not too small, because if we can't read it, if it's so tiny we need a magnifying glass to read it, then it's not really of value. So you can be all kinds of creative with how you lay it out, with doing the margins, with doing tables. Please be creative and change that. We are all for it. Okay, now as far as at the session, you will have a document camera. It does have, you know, document camera hooks up to the projector, and they do have a standard VGA cord. So if you want to bring a computer, you are welcome to, but just make sure that you bring your power cord and your computer. If you have a MacBook or an iPad or something you want to hook up, make sure you have the proper dongle so that you can make that connection. We had one group that brought iPads for everybody to use. Their district said, yes, we will allow you to bring them. And so that was fantastic. But they had to carry that in and take care of it and then carry it back out. So with that, if you need any kind of display items, manipulatives, algebra tiles, which is a manipulative, posters, cards, anything, you are welcome to bring that. But CAMT does not provide that. And we had a group one year and they did popcorn because they were doing an activity with volume. So they brought the popcorn because it was lightweight and then they could pitch it and they didn't have to worry about bringing that. And it's cheap. We had one group and they did M&Ms, but they brought M&Ms for like 200 people. So that was not cheap, but they didn't leave with very much. So just think about balancing the quality of the presentation with what you're going to have to lug. My co-chair, Jerry, she does her own hour-long presentation, and she has a lot of manipulatives. So she uses one of those rolling suitcases to pack it. And it actually is brilliant because it is very easy to wheel. It's very contained. You don't have to worry about anything spilling out. We had one group that did an activity with water and vases, and that was great, and pitchers, and they just went and filled up in the bathrooms and had their water. So really your imagination is your limit. We've had people bring in Play-Doh, hula hoops, you name it. So lots of different options. Now as you think about materials, you will have 4 tables that seat 8 to 10. And so you can have 32 to 40 people. We say that range because we ask for 8, but the standard hotel convention center setup is 10 chairs. So we just say go ahead and plan for 40. That way if we have extras, that's fine. So those card sets with 10 people at a table, I did 3 to 4 sets per table. So I was bringing about 16 sets of cards, and then I was reusing them each time. So as secondary folks, you're very used to that idea of having class sets. But that lets you know. So this is a sample floor plan. It will depend on the convention center, what that looks like. But these are the 6 sessions that will be going on at the same time. And so you'll have your 4 round tables. These will be separated by drapes on PVC pipe. Where that rectangular table is, that's where your screen will be. And you'll have your projector right in front of there. I will tell you it's kind of like an open concept classroom in that you can see and hear what at least 1 or 2 other people are doing. And so if you plan on doing something with like a movie or a movie clip, just make sure you bring some pretty powerful speakers so that people can hear. I've had 1 or 2 groups do that. Most do not, because remember, you only have 25 minutes. All right, so next steps. I'll just put them all up here. You'll start working on your activity. And when we say a lesson template, that's a really broad, generic term, just making sure that you have all the teacher components. Make sure it's front to back. I have had some teachers who say, Shelley, I cannot live with only front to back. I need some extra pages. And we say that is fantastic, but you'll need to bring those. So if you think that you need more than the front to back page or more than a class set, just talk with your campus or your districts that they can help you get those run off and put that on their bill. But we know many times districts don't have the cash or the copy count to do that. Others would have brought those communicators, those kind of clear plastic with dry erase markers, and they'll use those so that they can reuse things. But I definitely encourage you to think class set, so you're not doing quite as many materials. And again, we post the PDFs of all the activities on the website for 4 weeks after camp. 4 weeks, 4 months, it's whenever I go back to pull it down. We want them up and available so that teachers can use them with their kids. All right, any questions so far before we get into deadlines?
No, I think she answered all my questions.
Nope, we're covered.
Okay. Siva, I know you've done it before, so she's a STEPS veteran helping us out again. And Kim is a STEPS veteran helping us out again. So that tells you it can't be too bad if they came back for more. No, it's exciting, and my favorite part is seeing the teachers leave and go, this was the best thing ever, because they can come and get lots of activities in a relatively short period of time.
Exactly.
All right, so this first deadline is the only one that's really, really pretty tight, is I need your title and your brief description for the CAMT program booklet. And I need that by March 10th. Now, if you're looking at your calendar going, there is no way I can get it by March 10th, email me, call me, we'll work out something. But they are literally holding the program booklet for us so we can get the title and the description in. So again, think about something fun and jazzy. You can just email it to me. And don't make it so specific that you're tied in and you have no room to wiggle once you start writing your activity, but make it specific enough that people have a clue of what they're getting when they leave. So that one's the most specific one. And so what I will do is I will send the information that you filled out on the spreadsheet, well, on the Google form, which turned into a spreadsheet, with your description and your title, and that's how they will register you for the CAMT conference. And so that registration lets you attend any of the other sessions when you're not presenting. So it's, as CAMT, it's become more expensive to host. That's become a better and better deal. Okay. Now the other 2 deadlines, actually there are 3, they're really flexible. We ask that by May 2nd, you send us the first draft of your lesson. And then we have about a 2-week turnaround we'll go through, Jerry and I will read through the lessons, provide feedback, ask questions, and then we give you about another 2 weeks to return any final revisions or requests. Because our goal is that this will be wholly finished by the time you leave for the summer, and all you'll have to do is the day before just kind of practice a couple times and get ready to go. Now, if you're like, Shelly, May 2nd, no way, we are still in heavy-duty mode. Can I have until June 2nd to do it? Absolutely. You can go into the summer, but we just have to work around calendars and getting them printed. So these May dates are totally flexible. And if you're like, can I turn it in May 5th? Absolutely. We just don't want you to have to worry about it during the summer. But if you're like, no, that is the time when I can think about it, that's fine too. It really is fine. But that March 10th is the one deadline that we really need your descriptions by. And then these are the teams. And so based upon what you filled out on your application, this is the general topics that we have you down. So if you're like, no, we didn't really want to do that one, let me know. We'll see if we can move you around. I think we have filled our 1 vacant team, but we try to be really flexible even with how we do things. Like there was a Pythagorean theorem session that one year we had one under the algebraic reasoning because it really was about trying to help kids understand the manipulation and what does that mean. Another year we had Pythagorean theorem under geometry because it was about the conceptual development. And so we're just looking for sessions that make sense and have a connection. So if that doesn't work, we'll see what we can do to move around teams.
That's good.
Important to know is that if you are the geometry, measurement, data, pretty much everything but algebra session, you're presenting Monday, July 10th, and you will be in the afternoon. So you'll present from 1 to 3:30. We ask that you show up at 12:30 to set up your session, get your handouts, get ready to go. If you are the algebraic teams, you'll be presenting Tuesday morning, and you'll present from 10 to 12:30, and then we'll ask you to report to the room at 9:30 to get set up. Now, in that same room, when we're not presenting, the elementary version, Mathorama, they're presenting. So you're welcome to stop by and see how does it work, what does it look like. If you have materials that you need to drop off, you can drop it off and we work with the Mathorama coordinators, so you can drop off materials so you don't have to lug those around the convention center.
If we're presenting Tuesday, we still come on Monday and we can watch the rest of it, right?
Absolutely. Yep. You can come Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And if you present Monday, you can come Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Absolutely. In fact, we encourage you to take advantage of that as many times as you can and go to as many sessions. And they have some good keynote speakers lined up. And of course, just going to the sessions that other teachers and specialists are presenting. It's a fantastic opportunity. All right. All right. Last bit of information. When you name your files, I will tell you what I would request and then what I really need. If you're doing one of the algebraic reasoning activities, just put ALG in the front and then put your 2 last names. If you are doing geometry, measurement, etc., we're just going to call it middle school, MS, and then put your 2 last names. If you forget, what letters did she want at the beginning? Just put your 2 last names and I will rename the file. That helps us keep track of who submitted and who do we need to email back. That just helps us out. Like I said, it's not a hard and fast rule, but it does help us out a little bit. All right, so last little bit of information. This is the biggest issue that Jerry and I have on the day of the session. That's what if your session ends early? Because you might be thinking, oh, no big deal, it just ends early. But when you're in an open room classroom, it's kind of like when you're in teaching and somebody lets their kids out of class a few minutes early. Your classroom falls apart, right? Because kids are like, wait, where are they going? What are they doing? So you have to keep them seated for the full 25 minutes, or what happens is it starts to disrupt all the other sessions. And teachers are much like kids. They don't like to just sit. They want to get up and go. And so we recommend that you have planned kind of some sponge type activities. And if worse comes to worse, then if you see, oh wait, I'm running faster, I have 15 minutes left and I only have 5 minutes of presentation. That's where you pause, you start working some problems. You'll have some chart paper there and you can say, all right, so when it comes to proportionality, what are the things your kids are really strong with? And you record that on the chart paper. What are some struggles that your kids have? We write that on the chart paper. Then we do the activity and we come back and say, okay, which of these struggles did this activity address? Right? So you're helping them make a transfer to their own classroom. So it's not just filling time, although you are trying to extend your time. It's helping them fill time with something that's going to transfer back to their classroom. So to help out with this, we have this historic 5. We've had this 5 since we started STEPS almost 15, 16 years ago. And what we will do is Jerry and I will come around and we will hold this 5-minute sign up whenever you have 5 minutes left in your session. And we will stand there until somebody makes eye contact with us to let us know that you have 5 minutes. And that's just to help you mind time because you're trying to manage your materials, your presentation, all of that. So it's just that friendly warning to say either you need to slow down, we still have 5 minutes left, or, oh my goodness, I have 10 minutes of material and I only have 5 minutes to go. What do I need to start cutting? So we will do that just to kind of help. And because we don't always have microphones or anything to do that. So we'll give you signals as far as when to start and when to stop. But we do want you to mind that time because it's kind of like with teaching. You want bell-to-bell teaching and we want bell-to-bell presenting. Okay? And so that's it as far as the basic information. I know it's a lot of talking on my part, but I wanted to kind of give you all of those pieces. Are there any questions you have this evening?
Yeah, so we can do anything in geometry measurement data, right? So we can do anything. Like we kind of thought service area, but now we're like, we're not sure still. So, but as long as it's something within geometry measurement and data, we're good, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, and right now you have an opening in algebra, so if we decided to go to...
No, I think they filled it, she said.
Oh, it's been filled?
Yeah, I think we filled it since I think we filled it as of last night. But if you decide you want to change, let me know. I can see if let me know kind of soon so we can see if we can make some trades.
Sounds good. Well, I think we're fine where we are. I was just thinking.
Yes, thinking is good. All right, so in the webinar yesterday, people said, I don't have any questions now, but I imagine I'll have some as I get going.
Exactly.
Our email, send them. It's kind of like with kids, there are no dumb questions. There's questions for clarity. Jerry reminded me yesterday that we'll send out a couple emails as it gets close to the deadlines, just as gentle reminders. Hey, this deadline's coming up. What questions do you have? We try not to flood your inbox, but just enough to kind of help you as a reminder. And I said, don't hesitate to email us and say, can we have an extension? Do you have any ideas for this? Because we want this to be a good time for you, because we literally could not do this without you. So we're very thankful for your time. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, then I will say have a good evening. And let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing your awesome presentations.
Oh,
the session that you recorded, will you be emailing it to us?
I probably won't email it, but because of the file size, but I will post it probably in a Dropbox file and send you a link to it. Yes, ma'am.
Like a link or something. Okay.
Yes. Great question. Thank you. All right. Well, have a good evening, and thank you for joining me online. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank
Shelley.
you for letting us have the webinar. That was amazing. I appreciate that. So
Oh,
thank
good.
you.
Good, good. Thank you. I appreciate that feedback.
Yeah, definitely.
I agree. All right.
All right. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too. Good night.
Good night.